Hey guys, welcome to back to another edition of Tech School. Today we have Johanna speaking. I'll let her kind of give her bio here in a second and kind of start things off. I know we're excited to have her back. I know she's a part of our internal team, right? So we're all familiar with her, but I hope you guys like the talk. For those of you that are either on Zoom or on YouTube, if you guys have questions throughout this talk, feel free to leave them in the chat. Leave them as a comment, whatever, and we'll be monitoring them. So if something comes up, we can ask those questions here, and we can get answers for you in real time. So that'll be fun. And then if you are watching on YouTube, if you're watching this, not in real time, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff, because that helps out with our reach and helps us reach more people and help more people, right? So, yeah, let's get into it.
All right, that sounds great. Thanks, Stephen. So I'm Johanna. I'm the COO and one of the co-founders of Fokcus. I'm looking at a camera right now, so I apologize if if my eyes wander around. It's harder to talk to a camera than a person, and I'm sure all of you founders are going to discover that as well. And Curling has always great advice on how to manage that. So he's been tutoring me. My background is mostly project management. I've started a few companies, and I have worked in project management across multiple industries, including finance and entertainment and biotech. So I've seen a lot of different types of projects and a lot of different scales of projects, and that turns out to be a really useful skill in starting a startup. Most of you probably won't be able to hire a project manager right off the bat, so I wanted to equip you with some basic skills and things that you can use right away to help improve your processes and help feel like you're making progress, especially in those really early stages of startup when it's hard to tell if you're actually making progress because you're doing a lot of brainstorming and trying things out, and sometimes it feels like you're not getting anywhere. But the tool that we're going to talk about today is called Kanban, and it's going to help you sort of visualize your progress and hopefully manage your processes a little more efficiently. So I'll jump in a little bit with some vocabulary stuff. So Kanban is a framework, and Curling told me just a few minutes ago that we're going to do a blog post where we're actually going to define some of these terms, so don't worry if you don't catch it, and don't worry about taking notes. So Kanban kind of came out of lean manufacturing. Lean is another term that we should define. I won't do that here, but you can check out the blog later for that definition. But basically, it came out of a manufacturing concept and has been adapted to be used across other types of industries, including software development and startups. It also sometimes is like you'll hear Kanban versus Scrum. They're both frameworks that are used with the Agile methodology. So Agile is another one that we should define, as well as Scrum. But basically, it's a way of doing iterative development so that you can work quickly and efficiently. Let's see. The other thing that's really cool about both of the frameworks is that they allow for shared responsibility, which is really important in a startup because even though you may have founders that are leaders and you might have, your team might grow quickly, you might have, 5 or 10 people, a lot of times all those people are so busy they don't have time to manage the other people in the startup. And so everyone kind of needs to contribute individually and needs to understand what we need to work on and needs to understand how they can, just find something to work on that they want to own and pick it up and run with it. People that show up and say, what do you want me to do, are really hard to have in a startup because everybody's so busy doing, you don't have time to make up the plan for what all the other people are going to be doing, which is kind of what project managers do and managers. So I think that some of these tools can sort of shortcut that process. If you have some people that really want to contribute, but they really don't they're not sure what to do, or if you have a team that's growing quickly and you need to figure out a way to make sure everybody knows what the priorities are to work on, this tool can be useful. And also, if it's just you and you need to get organized, this is an easy and quick way that you can organize just your own work and keep track of it, even if you don't have other people in your startup yet. All right, so that's kind of like where it came from, what it is, and then like who can use it, which is pretty much everybody. I like to use Kanban in our startup particularly. So I'm focused on operations, so I care a lot about operational things, and so I'm always showing up with different tools for us to use. But I like it in particular because it helps us all see visually kind of what we decided together were the priorities. And so what we do is the founders, we all meet like once a week, and we review the Kanban. This is the Kanban, or a sample of a Kanban. And we actually talk about, like, are these actually the priorities? And are they high or low? Are they done? Are they stuck? Like, do we really have resources to work on this? Is it really important to what we're trying to accomplish right now? So we sort of have this process, and I'll walk you through that as well. So now we'll talk specifically about the Kanban. So this board is our Kanban board, and it is a piece of poster board, or this particular one is foam board. You can see the thickness of it, so it's a little sturdy for moving around. We have binder clips hanging on the top because around all of our rooms, we actually have nails in the walls, so we can hang up these boards. But it is totally like startup hack, right? It's binder clips from the office supply. You can buy boards like this at the dollar store. And then this is just tape to set up the lines so that they'll be permanent as we move things around. And these are stickers. And I even wanted to show you this. Like, don't spend a lot of money on this. Just make a tool. I ran out of O's, and so I used the Q. And I tucked the little thing underneath here and made an O, and it always peels up. And that just reminds me about how we make do as a startup. You don't want to spend all your resources on the things that are critical. You don't want to spend all your resources on, making a fancy board that nobody but your internal team is going to see. You can also do this on a whiteboard. And then I wanted to show you this other one that we pieced together. I'll confess that I have a secret crafting habit. So you can see I just pieced together tape with duct tape, 6 pieces of a scrapbook paper, and so and made a big board just with 6 pieces of 12 by 12 scrapbook paper. So it doesn't have to be fancy. Oh yeah. So that's sort of the constructing of the board, but basically you have titles across the top and you have columns. And you use it to organize work. This one is organized as like the backlog, the stuff we're not working on right now, the low priorities, the high priorities, and the done. A lot of boards also have one more column, which is blocked, like you'd have it here or here, where it's like things we can't work on right now because they're dependent on something else, or we're stuck because something we can't control, or something is too hard for the team that we have right now, or too complex, or it's technology that we just haven't figured out yet. So some of the like biotech startups, like you might get blocked, right? Because you're trying to solve problems that nobody solved before. And so I think sometimes a blocked column can be useful, but we update ours so often that we don't. We just sort of try to figure out, like, if it's blocked, it doesn't go on the board, or it goes in the backlog, and we don't worry too much about the complexity of 5 columns. You can also use a Kanban for other things, like here's another one. I'll peek around the edge of it, but you can see that this one has. Let's see if I can get the whole thing in the framework. Maybe if I put it up here. There you go. So you can see I have aware, interest, decision, and action. And again, across the top, you can see that I just use the stickers that I happen to have. You can use your handwriting. You can use a Sharpie. It doesn't matter. But this is our sales board. So once our team sort of got bigger, we still use this board with the founders, or the senior management team, or whatever you want to call that, and then we sort of developed a sales team, and this is the board that we use specifically with the sales team. So we don't bother the sales team with all the stuff that's going on across the whole organization. We just focus on like what are the deals that are on the table right now, and then we use this tool to sort of manage and prioritize. And then eventually, you might outgrow this, or you might decide that this process doesn't work for you if you're meeting virtually. And in those cases, there's online tools. There are free tools online called like Trello. It's Trello.com, where you can set up a virtual Kanban. You can set up multiple boards, and you can control permissions. You can share this information. You can do virtual meetings with your teams and manage things that way. So let's see. So what we kind of did on ours is we color coded. So and I think our color coding thing fell off, but we had like pink was a particular person, and blue was a particular person, and yellow was a particular person. So we invested a little bit in colored Post-it notes, and then each person we made sure, like, you see there's a lot of pink on here right now. So then we have a talk with whoever is pink, and we say like, hey, there's like a lot of pink on the board right now. Like, are you giving too much stuff? Like, or maybe pink's tasks are smaller than, like, blue doesn't have very many tasks, but maybe blue's tasks are really big. And so that's why blue can only have a few tasks, but pink can have a lot of tasks because all their tasks are like make a phone call, send an email, or things that are bite-sized chunks of things to do that are pretty small. Let's see, what else? So we meet at least once a week, and we go through this board, and we, like I said before, we check the priorities, and and then our favorite thing to do, and everybody's always competing for this, as we got more engaged in this process, we say, like, oh, can I move it to the done column, right? And then like, and then each week as things get moved into the done column, we would then, so at next week's meeting, we take everything off the done column and we move new things into the done column. And we don't throw them away. We actually take them and put them in a binder clip. And we keep a little stack like this. And this is a really cool visual thing that you can share with your team to show how much work your team is actually doing when it feels like we don't have a product yet, our company's not launched yet, we barely launched, we don't have any customers yet, we have only one customer. Like, there are things that you can do, and these will add up really quickly. And the more you do this, the more people are like, oh, there's a task that I had that needs to go on the board, and people will get really excited about participating in this process. And it surprised me, I think, how motivating it was to have these stacks. And so we sort of created this process where we would just keep them, and as we pull them off, we'd add them to the stack. We used a fatter binder clip, and then when the binder clip was so full it couldn't hold anymore, we put a new sticky note on, one final sticky note on that had the date that we had finished that stack. And so we could kind of line them all up by date and be like, okay, during that month, look, we made 3 stacks. And so we did things like that I think were really motivating. How are we doing on time? There's about 4 minutes left. Do you want to check for questions, or Stephen's camera's off, but I think he's still there. So that's sort of the construct of like, what is a Kanban, and like, how do you use it, and how do you build one, and simplify it a little bit. What do you think, Stephen? You want to?
Sure, we can open up for questions, or if you want to finish the whatever stuff you wanted to go through, and we can do questions then, or.
I think I just really wanted to cover that tool today. I do have an article that we can share afterwards that talks specifically about Scrum versus Agile. We can talk about that a little bit. Just that Scrum is more focused on efficiency, and Kanban is focused on efficiency, and Scrum's focused on velocity, kind of like going fast. We actually use both tools, and we just use them for different things. So we use Kanban sort of to manage our startup, like at the macro level, and we use Scrum and more specific Agile methodology to manage like development tasks. I really like both of those tools. You'll hear people talking about Scrum and sprints, and we could totally do a separate talk on that, and talk about how you use those types of things to sort of keep your team focused. But having a Kanban and making it available and enabling people to check it, like everybody kind of knows, like, oh yeah, that wasn't a priority. We did put it in the backlog. We decided that together. They're like, oh yeah, that is a priority. We didn't work on that this week. Oops, we better get focused, right? And like, yay, we finally did something and we moved it over, and that felt really good. All right. You know, you'd asked me a couple questions at the beginning that from the cohort. One of them was about whether it was appropriate for, you know, one or two people, and I think yes. I think I actually use this. I have a separate board that's just my board that I use to manage my own stuff, and eventually I actually converted mine from a physical board to an electronic board, because that was easier for me to be able to check. I could check it on my phone and I could check it on my laptop, and I didn't have to be in a specific space to do it. But if you have specific time that you're working on your startup and you're always in the same space, like a physical board, I think it's easier to get your head around. What was the other question that you guys had asked? There's one other one about whether it was appropriate for a startup. And I think, you know, emphatically my answer would be yes, I love this tool. How are we doing?
Hey, Johanna.
Yeah.
Alex, how are you guys? Good to see you. Quick question
Good.
on the board. I love this process. Is it important to, or is it advisable to put the color codes by department or task or person? And I don't know if I missed the part about what the color code.
Oh, yeah. So we actually did it by department. And then we had like a main person that was sort of the head of each department. So we had one person that was like sales and business development, and one person that was like operations, and then one person that was like research for us. But you don't have to use the color coding. And I think later on when we got busier, we might have abandoned the color, or we ran out of one color of sticky note, and we abandoned it. The other thing you can do is use stickers. Like if you have sticky notes that are all one color and you have stickers, and you can use those to put little dots, or you can use a Sharpie to put a little dot on to indicate which one was which.
I really like the simple ideas. I mean, the simple ideas are the best. It's like the simple the business, the better it is.
Exactly. But it was really cool to be able to see the progress, and also to see like when our board got too full and we would start to, you know, stick sticky notes all around the bottom and the edge, and we had to layer them. And we're like, too much stuff on the board right now. Either we need more help, or we have to like scale back what we're trying to do, because when you try to do too many things, then you end up, you know, you can't focus enough to accomplish any of them.
Very nice.
So it's a good visual gauge for you know, for whether you have the right amount of work on everybody's plate.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Great to hear from you. All right. Steven's there.
Yeah, hey, I got a question for you, Johanna.
Yeah.
So I know that you have some experience using tools like this with different teams, right? If you talked about going through a few different startups and things like that, things that work, things that didn't work. As far as this board goes and this kind of way of thinking, this tool, is there a time when you found that maybe it didn't work? You talked about when there was just a load of tasks on there, right? If you have you know, teams of 10 or 12 people working, let's say in a department, is it better to use a tool like Trello or something where it's a little more systematic and maybe easier to manage that group of people? Or is this better for like, you know, higher level or smaller teams, right? Like a management team of 3 or 4 people, or when your startup's semi-small? Is there times when this works very well and this works not so well? It's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So I think a couple points there. You asked a great question. It has some nuances to it. I think that I like this tool for sure for a management team and for small teams, but I also like it for big teams. I've used it with teams as big as like 20 or 25 people, where we would have a daily meeting and we would go through this. But I even found in those meetings, like once you got very close to a milestone and you had really concrete deliverables to do, like in the daily meeting, we weren't using the board as much. We were mostly just like, hey, what does everybody need? Are you okay? And then we stopped using the board. So don't force yourself to use it if it's not working or if you outgrow it. Just change your process a little bit. And I think we could do a separate session on Scrum and sprints and some things like that. There's some tools you can use in parallel with this, so you can kind of use this for planning. This works really well for things that don't have deadlines, for things that, I mean, maybe you have a goal, like we want to finish something by the end of the year, but it's very abstract. You don't actually know how long it's going to take, and you don't know even what the tasks are yet. And you're trying to just figure out, are people interested, and are we trying the right things? Like, this is a really good way to manage tasks and activities to make progress without having to be so granular that you could assign people, like, here's your list of things to do this week. And I guess the other thing is when your team is working virtually, like you could have a meeting like we are right now, and you could have the physical board and move the Post-it notes over and do it on camera, and it would work. But if you wanted to do it asynchronously so that everybody wasn't necessarily online at the same time, I think using a board like Trello that you can share out with the team is probably makes good sense. And you can test with your team and see what works better. We tried a few different electronic methods, and our team just doesn't really like it. Like, that's just our team's personality. We had, our founders are, even though we're a tech company, like we're, some of us were very visual, and just having a board and sitting and talking and not having to be looking at a computer, but actually looking at each other and talking to each other was a more useful thing than having a board that just felt like a thing that you logged into and didn't interact with personally. Any other questions? I'm trying to think if I have any good stories about it. I remember Andrea in particular getting very excited when she would get a whole stack of Post-it notes. It was really fun.
We just had Sam joined, and we have some few other people. If you guys have questions, I think Alex, kind of jumped in a little bit ago, but if you guys have questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. We can, give you the floor to speak on it or anything like that. Johanna, just a follow up to that, are there tools? So I know that a lot of startups nowadays are now doing everything virtually, right? Or a lot more virtually than they were before, right? With COVID and everything else. Are there tools where you could do the same thing as a board like this, but through some, virtually, right? Instead of actually having to have a physical board, because everyone maybe is doing things through Zoom or, working from home.
There, we could share a list of resources. Like Trello is the one that pops up in my head. We use Trello for other stuff. Like every year we have a big birthday party for my two daughters, and we actually manage through Trello because I'm a big project manager nerd. I even project manage my birthday parties. But we make a board, and I share it out with my mom and my sister-in-law, and we all sign ourselves up for which tasks we're going to do, and we set up columns of like done, stuck, purchased, like completed, and so for sure I know Trello works well, but I read an article earlier today when I was just sort of looking for virtual tools, and none of the other ones are sticking in my mind right now, but we can for sure share out a list of options. One of my favorite things about Trello is that it's free.
That's definitely a plus when it's free.
Like that. I was trying to. Is Sam available now? I think he just joined. He came from another meeting just to hop on. Are you there?
Yes.
Can't see.
You could probably hear my
Hey.
kids in the background. I realized I wasn't muted.
Have you used this tool or a tool like this? Have you used Kanban? No.
Not necessarily. I always get into those tools and then I get overwhelmed with them. So
Yeah.
it takes, I think the value, Johanna, like what I always admire about you is you're really good at those, and you need somebody who's sometimes really good at managing these types of things, because somebody like me who's scatterbrained all over the place, like it would be like, I get the value behind them, but it's also the discipline that it takes to just keep them updated and everything.
That's true. Somebody has to own it and organize the meeting and walk everybody through the process and get everybody into the routine. That's for sure. It does take some work.
It does take some work, and anyway, so it's always, those are the hard things with some of these tools, is they're useful, but they I don't know, I just become so scatterbrained.
I always think I wouldn't use the term scatterbrained. I'm going to be creative and thinking about a lot of things. But I always think that you and curling are quite similar in the way that you think about things. And so, working with a co-founder who is like that, it has been really a good experience for me, because then I'm able to bring these tools, but sometimes they just flat out don't work. I've set up so many different electronic systems for curling, and he just not into them, or he's doing all his work on his phone while he's in 10,000 meetings, and he has 3 minutes of attention span in between stuff, and he doesn't have time to do the administrative work to update, sales systems and, with notes from his meetings and stuff like that. He's just like after a while, I'm like, this tool is just not working. And so we've created other processes, so I got him, so we would just have a meeting once a day or every other day where he would download to me what the new tasks are, or we'd have these management meetings where we would talk about things and really Crony would share information and strategic direction and vision. And a lot of times these meetings we would completely go away from what the Kanban work was, and we talked more strategically, and we were making decisions about what's in backlog and what are we really working on right now versus did we move the tasks from column to column? And sometimes, we'd have 2 or 3 weeks where we didn't move anything over, and that was okay because we were sort of thinking bigger picture and more strategically, and we were trying to just sort of pull out of the scatterbrainedness or the huge volume of activity inside Curling's brain that we were trying to just really sorry, there's notifications coming up on Curling's phone. And so anyway, it was a tool that helped us have those conversations in a more focused way. But for sure, if the tool doesn't work with your team, change it a little bit, set up a system where if somebody's willing to own this process, the other people are feeding that person information, and that person is actually managing the board. It's not necessarily going to be a perfect fit for everyone.
Yeah, I think you said it correctly. I think every business needs a system. There's lots of different tools to develop more productive systems, more efficient systems. Some of those tools will work for you based on your overall system, right? Some of them won't. You got to kind of pick what works for you. And the other thing I was thinking of that's somewhat of a challenge is you do have somewhat of, I would say, generation differences, right? I'm not that old, but still this idea, when I look at Slack, it's almost like text messaging and chatting. And I still come from the era of email is the way you communicate. And I still think email is the best, but other people, people you're going to work with, people you're going to hire and so forth, are going to think that the chat style of communication is more effective. And so there's sometimes those conflicts between different people on your team and how they like to communicate, right? Because for me, an email, if you send an email, the traditional, I don't know if you guys think this way, but in the past, it was always thought you gave somebody like 24 hours to respond to an email before you
Right.
Followed up with them. Like that's kind of was kind of the practice. Now with the chat style, it's like if it's not instantly responded to, like then you're following up with them quite rapidly. And so sometimes, that's like the hard thing is some of these tools are great for one group, not the other. You have to blend them. You have to work. Anyway, that's just some ideas and thoughts that.
No, I think that's a really good point. And I think particularly if you're working with software developers, you need to be really sensitive to those types of things because, or anyone, who's working on like very complex tasks where if you take their attention away, it kills their productivity. So if you are instant messaging, or slacking, your developers 24/7, like they're not going to get any work done because they kind of need to like go off by themselves. And sometimes they have crazy habits. I worked with one developer who just listened to like hardcore techno music while he was coding. I have no idea how he concentrated while he did that, but that was his process. And I worked another place where the development team, we tried an open office plan and the developers completely protested. I came to work one day and they had taken over an office and they put up like do not disturb tape and signs like all around the office. They were like, and they posted office hours, like you can only talk to us on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 2 and 4 p.m. because they just had it with, all of the artists and the other people that were, in the open floor plan because they couldn't get any work done. So I think, for any tool, for any process, you have to make it work with your team dynamics. Okay, final thoughts. I am a project management nerd and I really love Kanban, but and any tool that helps sort of organize lots of information. And I think as a startup, you are going to have a lot of information. People are going to have a lot of questions, especially if you are going from being one founder or one or two founders to a bigger team. The team is going to want to know what's going on. And that creates two problems. One is that you need to make sure everybody's on the same page all the time. And the other problem is that as your team gets even bigger, it's harder and harder to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So I think another way that you can outgrow a tool like this is if you don't have somebody actually specifically managing this, then your team can really get out of sync if they don't feel like they have access to this information, or if you're making decisions on a weekly basis about what your organization's priorities are, or even more often than that, then you need to make sure that you have some way to make sure that everybody in your team sort of knows what's going on and isn't working on something that's last week's priority.
I think that's a good point. That something founders might not also be used to is that as your company grows, you switch from almost the person who's been doing everything and the creative mind. And this is the challenge for like founder CEOs is that their role switches to the communication side of things, right? It really goes from you doing all and running everything and having your hands in everything to being the person who almost purely is just communicating what the vision is and the strategy and stuff. You look at like Bob Iger when he was talking in his book recently, that was what he saw as the biggest thing you had to do as a CEO is you had to be clear on your communication. And so tools like this, I think, would be helpful in making sure that everybody feels a part of the organization and has an understanding of what the direction and vision of it is. So I think that's where you see founders being replaced, I think, because to manage a startup is different than managing a large organization where you have a different responsibility as a founder.
And the other way around is true too, right? Somebody who comes from a big organization trying to do a startup or to work in a startup can have its own set of challenges because they're not used to, the hierarchy and the structure and the tools and the staff that's available to help implement some of these types of things that just require more resources than a startup might typically have. All right, I'm supposed to ask Pam about Innovation Hub updates.
Innovation Hub updates.
Is
But
that
we're
right?
still working on our innovation challenge for this summer's kind of competition. So students, anybody in the community can get involved. So, I expect something from Steven here. To get in and look at how we can help K through 12 schools get back into session this fall. There's going to be a lot of things that schools need assistance with, and so there might be new startup ideas or programs or services, things that will be useful, and hopefully we can brainstorm up some good ideas to help schools come this fall.
And make the Kanban for it.
Yeah, definitely. So that's going on. The submission deadline is August 1st. We've got a couple weeks. The submission requirement is a 2 to 3 page, just executive summary of basically the problem you want to address, your idea, your solution to that problem, and just kind of what are the steps to make it implemented. Is this something that you would start a business with, or is this something that is kind of like maybe a new program? That it's not entirely entrepreneurial, but we invite entrepreneurs to participate. But if you're not an entrepreneur and you just want to do kind of some type of program or thing, it's open to those people too. So anyway, take a look at it on the CSUSM Innovation Hub website, and look forward to seeing people's ideas. And there's money for people to win, so that's always
good. That was important. All right, great update. I'm really excited to see what people come up with. Steven, I'll hand it back to you to wrap up.
Okay, sounds good. I think this is a pretty exciting talk today. We got some great insight from you, Johanna, from Sam, from Alex. I know Curling's kind of the cameraman for you today, so we got some questions from him too. It's pretty awesome. So thank you for speaking. Thanks, Sam, for coming on. Thanks, Alex, and everyone else for jumping on today. If you guys have kind of questions you think about after the fact, after this is over, feel free to post them on the as a comment on our YouTube video, and we can get to it, right? Or if, like in the future, if we have somebody else who's not part of Fokcus, right, speaking, we can forward those questions to them as well. So that's a good way to get your questions out there if you think of something after the fact. But yeah, thanks for coming on, and that's another episode of Tech School.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.